Got heated this week, and Senate Bill 3 is no longer a ban on certain guns, but Republicans, they still strongly oppose it. It's now passed the Senate heavily amended, and it goes on to the House. A major change at the end of last week. An amendment was added that would allow the sale of these types of guns, but the buyer would have to be vetted, complete a training course with a test, and be added to a registry.
Now, this is the Colorado legislators' attempts to make it virtually impossible for someone to acquire a semi-automatic firearm within the state of Colorado. I'm going to tell you that this is important not so much for whether or not you happen to live within the confines of Colorado, although clearly this is going to affect you. It does have the possibility, however, of being adopted by other states that have anti-gun legislatures. So, you know, there's the old line, if it happens in California, it's destined for the rest of the country. Well, that's not entirely a true statement anymore. We see pockets of idiocy that sort of manifest in different jurisdictions throughout the rest of the country, and then other states try to glob on. So let's talk about what Colorado is trying to do. Effectively, they are attempting to outlaw semi-automatic firearms. As a general rule, a semi-automatic firearm, whether it's a long gun or a handgun, is going to be illegal for someone to possess in the state of Colorado. However, there are exemptions, right? And if you fall within one of these statutory exemptions, then they will decide that you have the ability to exercise the privilege of owning a weapon for your self-defense. Now, the problem here is that the methodology that is required in order to be able to get a gun is going to be almost insurmountable. The first thing that you're going to have to do is go to your local sheriff and apply for a card that effectively says you are eligible to engage in the activity of attempting to buy a gun. So basically the background check that everybody is familiar with FFLs all over the country, there is, for lack of a better term, a pre-background check that's going to occur. And in this, you're going to have to be fingerprinted. Information is going to be taken from you. They're going to look to see whether or not you're a prohibited person, both at the state and the federal level. And then they will ultimately come to the conclusion, I suppose, that, yeah, there is nothing that would prohibit you from owning a gun. And they will give you this card that essentially says that you are eligible to begin the process. Now, they're also going to put you into a database, okay? This database will then be used by certified firearm trainers because you're not done. Now that you got your card, that doesn't mean you can run over to your gun store and purchase a weapon. No, now you're going to have to take a class. And there's basically 3 types of classes you can take. Assuming you're a hunter, then you can take a hunter ed class. However, that hunter ed class has certain statutory requirements. And there are a lot of people that are interested in purchasing a firearm for self-protection that have no interest in necessarily going through a hunter ed course. Well, for people like them, they can take the basic handgun course. This is a 4-hour course that has to be taught by a certified instructor, someone who a sheriff has deemed as being, enough of an expert that they can go ahead and they can teach this class. Typically, in these types of schemes, it's usually members of the department. You can see how that little incestuous relationship starts to manifest. Then, once you've gone through and you've done this particular class, that gives you a card that's valid for 5 years. But you're not done. You know, that 4-hour class is simply not going to be sufficient. Now you're going to have to take another class, a more enhanced class. That enhanced class has to be 12 hours, taught over 2 days. Once you've gone through that, then you get your card that now allows you to go and purchase a firearm. So then you go to the FFL, you go to purchase the firearm. At that point, they do the same background check that they did at the beginning. And you go through that same process that most of us are already familiar with. So let's look at this and kind of compare it to Bruin, the famous case, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin. So an individual wants to be able to acquire a firearm for the purposes of self-protection, or the purposes of target shooting, or the purposes of just putting the damn thing on their wall and turning it into a form of artwork. Regardless of what it is, they are looking to purchase a gun that is in common use for lawful purposes. So they can't. They have to go through all of these administrative hoops that is going to take a substantial amount of time before they are able to exercise this right. So to the degree that their rights have been abrogated as a result of this overburdensome process, their Second Amendment rights have in fact been abrogated. So now the burden shifts to the state. And the state has to show how this law is consistent with our nation's history, text, and firearms regulatory traditions that existed in 1791. Good luck. Okay, look, as a resident of California, in order to acquire a firearm, we have to go through and get a firearm safety card. This is a 35-question test. Okay, there is no training requirement that's necessarily associated with it. It's a very short, brief test that vast majority of people will have absolutely no problem passing. Now, I do have an issue associated with this from a philosophical standpoint, but as it relates to being an overburdensome, restriction on someone in California's ability to acquire a firearm, it's going to be difficult to suggest that this is overly burdensome. Okay. This, on the other hand, in Colorado is absolutely ludicrous. And there is nothing in the historical record that even remotely comes close to being as burdensome on someone's ability to acquire a weapon that existed in 1791. I mean, it simply doesn't exist. This law, I am absolutely convinced, is going to be, or this bill is absolutely going to be signed into law by the governor of Colorado. Okay, guys, I'm going to pause this video for just a second. USCCA, that sponsors these videos, they're doing a giveaway right now. It's very cool, and it is something that you're going to want to participate in. Now, the details are all in the description below, but you're going to want to jump on this really quickly. All right, with that, let's get back to the video. It will be challenged. A tremendous amount of the taxpayers' dollars in Colorado will be spent fighting to keep this law. The government will be lockstep. Now, this is absolutely essential for the people of Colorado. Keep in mind, as a little sidebar for a second, if you happen to live outside of Colorado and you acquired firearms in your home state, but you're going to be staying in Colorado for an extended period of time, there's absolutely nothing that would preclude you from bringing your weapons into Colorado. So you can have two people effectively residing right next to one another. One person is a Coloradan resident. The other person is a New Mexico resident. Okay. They both go to the same stores. They both go to the same restaurants. They both live in the same zip code. And yet one person has to go through massive amounts of legal hoops in order to have a Mega Blaster 3000. On the other hand, the New Mexico citizen who happens to be living next door, they don't have any of these restrictions at all. They get to have their Mega Blaster 3000. So in addition to being a Second Amendment related issue, there's also a Fifth and 14th Amendment related issues that deal with equal protection. Ultimately speaking, like I said, this was going to cost the taxpayers of Colorado millions of dollars in litigation. Ultimately, I suspect it's going to wind up before the Supreme Court if things go the way that I suspect that they're probably going to go, and it's going to be shot down as being completely burdensome. So If you are a voting resident of Colorado, I respectfully suggest it may be time to change your government. Now, I say that as a California resident, so I understand how difficult that might actually be. In any event, if you would like to email me, by all means do so. You can do it at stephen@artemishq.com. And as always, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.